Hearty hello and happy Monday. Welcome to today's information session on the 2023 Infy Makers Awards. My name is Stephanie Santoso, and I'm a senior program fellow with Infosys Foundation USA. I'm really looking forward to sharing more details about the awards with you and how you can participate in this great opportunity, which provides funding and professional development support for educators to engage students in CS through Maker Education. So I just wanted to provide a little overview of what we'll be covering in today's session. I'm going to just provide a little bit more background context on Infosys Foundation USA and the Infy Maker Awards, and then we'll spend a little bit more time reviewing the application and judging process and timeline. We'll also talk more about how you can use the funding you receive if you're selected as a winner, and then the unique professional learning experience you'll participate in, which will be led by the nonprofit organization Digital Promise. And my colleague, Kelly McNeil, who is an amazing learning experience designer at Digital Promise, is here with us. Thanks for waving, Kelly. And she'll provide some additional information about this. And she's also really happy to answer any follow-up questions that you might have about the PD experience. So we will have time at the end to field any questions you have. But if questions come up, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or we can also do if chat or the Q&A. There's also a Q&A the Q&A box in the webinar. We'll check both areas because I know sometimes folks prefer the chat, but if you can drop it in the Q&A box, that would be great. And then we'll also just monitor the chat as well. And folks will be able to unmute themselves when we get to the Q&A section too. And then I just want to encourage you to, definitely feel free to share your ideas and questions with us throughout the session. It's really designed to be a resource and a support for you as you're thinking about applying for this opportunity. So Infosys Foundation USA's mission, just to share a little bit more about the foundation, is to expand access to computer science and maker education for K-12 students, as well as post-secondary students and students who are adult learners, as well as supporting educators across the U.S. while working to digitally upskill all learners for 21st century technology-enabled opportunities. Through grants that support innovative programming and professional development and several signature programs and initiatives, including the Infy Maker Awards, the foundation works really closely with educators, school districts, nonprofit organizations, and other key partners. So we really take a collaborative approach to supporting both computer science and maker education learning in the U.S. So as I mentioned, Infy Maker Awards is one of the foundation's signature programs, and to date, the awards have supported maker education initiatives in more than 120 communities across the U.S., and we've provided more than $1.2 million in funding and professional development support. One additional initiative that you might be interested in addition to Infy Makers Award, is called the Pathfinders Online Institute. And I'll drop in the link to the Pathfinders Online Institute at the end of this session as well. But the POI, as we call it, or Pathfinders Online, is really a dynamic online learning platform. So the foundation works with different educators and PD providers to really sort of centralize a really diverse set of resources, so free, high quality computer science and maker education content for K-12 students, teachers, and families. And so you can create a free account and access a broad variety of lessons, activities, and tutorials from different leading content providers. So that might be something of interest if you're an educator and you haven't had a chance to check out Pathfinders Online Institute. Would definitely encourage you to do that, and it doesn't cost anything. You just sign up for a free account, and I'll make sure that you all have the link to that moving forward. So just a little overview of this year's Infy Maker Awards. So the 2023 Infy Maker Awards is open to educators, both formal and informal educators from K-12 schools, universities, so definitely higher education institutions as well, community colleges, libraries, museums, maker spaces, and youth-serving nonprofit organizations that are using maker education to promote equitable and inclusive pathways for students in computer science. I want to preface or just emphasize why it says K-12 plus, because historically, the foundation started out with a more specific focus on supporting K-12 students. Over the years, we realized that it's really, really critical to support K-12 students as well as students as they're moving into their post-secondary learning experiences, and really to support students as they're going into their professional settings or developing their careers, and that's why the plus is there. So, you know, if you are a faculty member at a community college and you're doing some kind of programming that includes K-12 students, but also includes community college students, Infy Maker Awards is definitely something that you're eligible for if you're you're teaching in a university and you're working very specifically with higher ed students. Infy Maker Awards is also something that you're eligible for. So in terms of sort of the main focus of the awards, we're going to be providing 10 winning educators with a small scale grant, so it's $10,000, and the opportunity to participate in the Making CS Inclusive cohort, which is the really customized professional learning experience that'll be facilitated by the national nonprofit Digital Promise, and that'll run virtually, realizing that the winners will most likely be sort of spread out across the country. That'll run from January to August of 2024. And then the grant, the $10,000 grant that each of the winning educators will receive, is flexible funding that can be used for materials, projects, research, community engagement, and more. So we've designed the grant to be really, really flexible, and we can talk a little bit more about the different ways that winners have used that grant in the past if folks have questions around that. So just a few things related to eligibility. We talked a little bit about the educators that are eligible for the program already, but a couple of other things just to note is that the institution or organization where you're teaching needs to be legally registered as either a 501c3 or a 170c1 in the US. And then if you're chosen as a winner, for the awards, the grant will be provided to your institution or organization, and then will be scoped specifically for you to use for your particular project or your initiative. This is just really emphasizing, again, what winners receive. In the past, specifically to the $10,000 grant, speaking to the $10,000 grant, teachers or educators have used them, you know, for structural improvements, if it's around actually creating a makerspace, or maybe you want to expand a makerspace you already have. You can use it for materials and equipment or technology. You could use the funding for stipends for student interns, or stipends for educators that you want to have utilize your makerspace for professional development programming, or impact and assessment research, or programming that gets the broader community involved in the work that you're doing. And then just a little additional detail on the professional development experience. So we'd like to have, because you know, we realize that funding can really be a barrier for educators to continue to provide these maker learning experiences for students, but we also realize that connecting with like-minded educators like yourselves can be really beneficial as well. We want each of the winners to be able to participate in this Making CS Inclusive cohort, but you'll also have an opportunity to then nominate up to two additional colleagues from your school or your organization to participate in that cohort with you. So you'll have, you know, kind of think of it as like a tiger team from your institution or organization that can participate with you. And then just a little bit on timelines. So the application for the awards is now open. So if you go to infymakers.com, there's a apply now link, and we'll walk through the application in a little bit more detail in just a minute here. But the deadline for applications is October 27th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So got about a month or so to complete that application. And then in mid-November, finalists will be announced on social media. So we'll do a review of applications internally with the foundation team between the deadline and mid-November. In early December, we'll be notifying the winners, close hold. And then we're planning on publicly announcing the winners and celebrating them the week of December 18th. So right before kind of the winter holidays and folks kind of leave for holiday break and things like that. And then in January will be the kickoff of the Making CS Inclusive cohort with the winners and their colleagues. And then that cohort experience will run from January to August 2024. And that'll consist of a couple of different elements, including monthly virtual sessions and some one-to-one coaching as well. So let's get into how to apply here. When you do go to infymakers.com, you can just you'll very easily see the apply now button, and that'll take you directly to the online application, which lives on a platform called Submittable. A lot of different organizations have used Submittable for either grant programs or competitions. And so we actually run our grants competition for Infy Makers through the Submittable platform. If you've never used Submittable before, you'll just need to create a free account. If you've used Submittable before, you can log into your current Submittable account, and you should be able to apply with your current account. One of the reasons why we run the application on Submittable is because it also allows you to be able to start your application and then save a draft if you want to start it and then you want to come back to it later. By creating an account, you're able to return to that draft and work on it some more before you final submit it to us. And the first portion of the application is pretty straightforward. We'll just ask you some basic contact details about yourself as the person entering the competition as the educator, and then some info about your school or your institution or organization. One thing that we want to note is that we are really dedicated to supporting communities and students that are either underrepresented in STEM fields or are living and going to school in under-resourced communities. And so there is a question around whether you're currently working with underrepresented or under-resourced students. So that's one additional question just to note. And then I did mention that if you're chosen as a winner, you'll have the chance to invite up to 2 other colleagues to participate in the Making CS Inclusive cohort experience. And we actually would love for you to add the 2 names of those individuals in this section. We realize that sometimes things will change. So it might be that, if you are chosen as a winner, if one of those individuals or 2 of those individuals can attend, then you can always, reach out to other colleagues later down the line. But we do ask that you sort of speak with your colleagues up front to get a sense for who at your institution or organization might be interested in participating, and then share that with us as part of the application. And then in the project narrative and accompanying elements segment, so you'll see on this slide, I actually you can see this is the direct interface for the online application. So this is exactly how these questions are worded in the application. But so sort of the main, I would say like the main portion or section of the application is this project narrative and accompanying elements section. We have a question where we just ask you to tell us a little bit more in your own words about the students and the families you serve. We also have a question about what motivates and inspires you as an educator. And then the big sort of like longer question is really to provide a detailed description about how your school or organization would use an Infy Makers Award to engage students in computer science through maker education. So that description question really should address a couple of different things. One is to talk about the challenge that the project is looking to address. So tell us what is the challenge or issue or obstacle that you're really looking to either attempt to solve or address, and then provide details about who the project will serve, how that project will be structured, including sharing more details about any partners that'll be involved, whether those are, partners within your organization, or if there are community partners. We'd love to hear about those. And then projected impact. We also know that sometimes you don't necessarily have the specifics around projected impact, and in the sort of in the spirit of the maker mindset, some of these things can be open-ended, but we'd love for you to just share what, to the best of your knowledge, you think that impact could potentially be. And then we also want to ask you to just share with us the computer science concepts and maker education concepts that align with your project. And we actually have, I also want to share here that you don't have to be a computer science teacher or educator to participate in this. And Kelly's nodding her head because in our last cohort of winners, I think the majority of the teachers were not computer science, like officially computer science teachers. It's more about just sharing with us how you think the work you're doing or the project you're proposing connects back to computer science and maker education concepts. We actually linked to a couple of different frameworks for computer science and for maker learning that you can use as reference points. So they're in the application themselves. You can click on them. They're the computer science. It's the K-12 computer science framework. Computer science education framework is what we link to. And then for the maker education concepts, we link to Digital Promises Maker Learning Framework, as well as Agency by Design's maker-centered learning model. And if you have questions about that, I'm happy to answer that a little bit more. And then the other sort of main element is just to share a high-level budget of how you think you'd use the $10,000. So when I say high level, I really mean high level. We don't need to know the exact model of the laser cutter you want to purchase. Like, we realize you might need to do some more research around that, or maybe talk to some of your fellow educators about what they think they might want to use. But if you already know that you want to do a project that requires a laser cutter, sort of speccing out how much of the $10,000 you need for a laser cutter and just letting us know what that is would be really helpful there. And we have a little template of a budget as a guide if you want to use that as a reference that's linked to the application. And then this is probably already something that you will have thought about as you're developing your idea, but we also just would love to hear your thoughts on how your organization plans to keep efforts around engaging students in maker education sustainable moving forward. So, that doesn't mean you necessarily already have to have another set of funders lined up to keep the program that you're proposing going, but just thinking about how will you engage some of your fellow educators and participating in some of the elements of your proposal with you. How might you like to see, what might you like, what might you like to see in terms of the ways that students take on some leadership opportunities in the program you're proposing, if there's a space for that in the project that you're proposing. Although, depending on the nature of the project you're proposing, that might not necessarily be very relevant. So I will hop us to the next, the sort of final two main two elements of the application. We just have, we'd love to hear from you directly through a short video that doesn't need to be anything fancy. So we ask that you upload a video 90 seconds long that just talks about you, your organization, or your school, and how you'd use the award to impact the lives of your students. And I just want to emphasize, this doesn't have to be a high production video. Some of the most compelling videos were simply educators that use their iPhone, and we're talking directly to the camera. It doesn't, I mean, if you like, if you have the skills and you want to create something that has sort of elements of like a higher production video, you can. But I do want to share that some of the most compelling videos have kept it really simple, and it certainly is, we're just looking to hear from you about your perspective. And you can also feel free, if they're, beyond yourself, if there are other educators or school leaders at your school, or leaders within your organization that are participating with you in the proposal, you can also have them say a few words in the video as well. And then the last element is a support letter from either your school or your organizational leader that just expresses that they are supportive of the project you're proposing and your participation in the professional learning experience. We have a letter template to make that easier. That's also included in the application as well. So you can also use that template if you like, and have your organizational or school leader sign that. And then just in terms of how we're going to be reviewing, so the reviewing criteria, I wanted to share, and I would also flag, we have contest rules that are like more detailed contest rules that are posted to the Infy Makers Awards site, and would encourage you to look through those with for additional detail. For today's session, I am trying to pull kind of what I thought would be the most helpful and relevant elements of those rules here, and highlight them and break them down a little bit more, because I know that the contest rules are also they're pretty written in heavy detail, and so I think breaking them down can be really helpful. But if you look at and this criteria is also reflected in the contest rules, but this is really what we'll be looking at, the main criteria that we'll be looking at as we review each of the applications, your submissions. We have five main criteria. We're looking at need, strength of the proposed plan, the educator's perspective, innovation, and then the support letter counts as an additional element to the criteria. So in terms of need, we're really, this is really heavily weighted because we really want to be able to support educators who, may find it the most challenging to be able to bring these learning experiences to their students because there aren't enough resources in their communities or in their schools or organizations. So we do ask you to share with us, are you working within a Title I school or working with low-income students? If you're an informal educator, we also ask you to share if you're an educator working with an underrepresented community in a STEM field, whether that's ELL students, Native American, African American, or Latinx students, as well as students who are neurodiverse or students with disabilities. Strength of the proposed plan is another key area. So we just really want to see that your project, what you're proposing, is realistic for the $10,000 budget that you have for that grant, or if you have additional funding somewhere and the $10,000 makes up the budget for a larger project, like, please share that with us, so we can understand if the project that you're proposing is reasonable given sort of the resources that are available. And then the third criteria is around educators' perspective. So we want to hear more about whether we want to see that an educator shares a clear and strong perspective around what motivates them to create opportunities for students to engage in CS through maker education. And really, we are looking to support educators that are aligned with the Foundation's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then when we talk about innovation, we don't necessarily mean that the idea that you're proposing has to be completely brand new. We realize that there's no reason necessarily to reinvent the wheel. If there's a project or a program that you've been doing already that you want to grow, or you may have seen a project or program that has worked really well for an educator in another community that you'd love to try to adapt for your students, and that can be considered innovation. We're really trying to see, the application of a existing program or project in a new setting would be considered innovation. We're also looking to see if your proposed plan, demonstrates a resourcefulness in addressing specific challenges or constraints. So if you're looking to solve a particular challenge that you're facing in a new or a different way, that also counts as innovation. And then the last element here is the support letter, and that's a smaller part of the criteria, but we do want to make sure that your organization is supportive of what you're proposing, and is also supportive of you being able to participate in the PD experience as well.
And Steph, we have a question in the Q&A, and I think I know it, but I'm going to ask you before I answer in the text. So the question from one of our attendees says, if one is awarded, is the money made to the organization or to the applicant?
So the money is awarded to the organization, but the way it is scoped is for the project that the applicant has submitted. So it will go though to the organization scoped for that particular project that was proposed. Thank you. I'll also flag too, in the past, and we'll do this again this year, is we want to recognize the educator as we place a strong focus on recognizing the educator as the winner as well as the organization. So when we do announce the winners, we would recognize you as the individual educator, and then of course celebrate the organization that you're representing. But we realize that so much of this work happens because of educators like yourselves. So yes, thanks for flagging that, Kelly. That was a really good question. And then finally, before I hand things off to Kelly, I wanted to just recognize and introduce this year's Infy Makers Awards judges. So every year we've put together pretty amazing panels of judges who really represent expertise and experience in maker education from sort of all walks of life and different backgrounds and sectors, and this year is no different. So these are our judges for this year. They're going to be helping us select the winners, and they include teachers and leaders in maker education, both in the classroom and in informal learning spaces, such as museums and libraries. And so I just wanted to thank them for their willingness to contribute their experience and expertise this year. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kelly McNeil at Digital Promise, who will share more about the really wonderful professional learning opportunity that Infy Maker Awards winners will have through the Making CS Inclusive cohort. All right.
Thank you, Steph. And before I get started, a couple more questions popped up in chat. One of them is, I'll just say it out loud, the foundation that they work for raises money for a charter school, asking if the foundation would apply on behalf of the school.
Yeah, I think that should be okay. I'm assuming if the foundation has, and we can also if you want, feel free to you can email for more information, but like we can look into it. But if the foundation is a 501c or is treated as a 170, then that should be fine. In the past, we've had winners that were university-based foundations that we gave the grant to, and I think it sounds sort of similar, but that would be fine. We would ask that like an educator is involved in that process, or an educator is the sort of the entrant, so that we sort of understand what that project is, who will be leading that project. But I don't think that there would be an issue there as long as that foundation is treated as a 501 or a 170.
Awesome. And then really just a comment from Clint. And I think it relates to the question about the money made to the organization or the applicant. He noted that some schools have a practice or a tendency of assigning an administrative charge as a percentage taken out of grants that teachers win. So I don't think I didn't experience that last year working with any of the educators, but I didn't know if you had any more insight on that stuff.
That's a really good question. So in the past, I'm trying to think, I'll have to, off the top of my head, I haven't had, when I've been reviewing the budget, like I can't think of a situation where, so one sort of maybe parallel experience there is like when you have, a faculty member that's applying, and is based at a higher ed institution, there's the overhead charge, right? And that sounds a little bit analogous to that. I would say to this particular educator, please feel free to build that into the budget. Like if that is, if there's a percentage that's built in and like that is a standard, just make sure to, if you can make the note in the budget that that's like a requirement from your school district, it's not going to count against you or anything like that. But we definitely want you to make sure that like that is accounted for. So obviously, we understand that that's what that's going to, but we as a foundation have given grants to higher education institutions that certainly have, they have an administrative overhead amount that gets deducted at that level, and that sounds somewhat analogous to that, and that's okay. Just make sure to flag that in the budget.
And Steph, I'm going to ask if you will actually, I can't share my screen, so if you can share the slides if you want.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that, Kelly. Yeah, let me just go back real quick. Hold on one second.
And then there's a couple more questions that pop up, so I can get started on, if you want, my initial introduction slide, and then we can get to those questions.
Yeah. 1 second. Let me just. Uh-oh.
And I see you, John, and I see the other question on the
okay.
nomination cohort. We'll get to those in just a second. So I just wanted to introduce myself to everyone. As Steph had said earlier, I'm Kelly McNeil, and I'm with Digital Promise. I am a learning experience designer. So I will be the instructional coach support and the learning experience design support for the Making CS Inclusive cohort. I just wanted to share a little bit about myself because learning experience is very near and dear to my heart and something that I take very seriously. Some of the things that I'm very passionate about our collaborative design. So actually, in terms of what are we doing, I will be meeting the award winners first, and we will be talking together as a cohort, and we will be collaboratively designing these things. A little bit about my background. I am a K-12 computer science educator. I taught in a makerspace, and I did design thinking in a classroom for K through 12. Then I went to Arizona State University, and I designed curriculum and technology programs for the National Verizon Innovative Learning Labs. Mentioned that now I'm with Digital Promise. And I'm also a student at Arizona State University. So I'm currently working on my educational doctorate, very specifically exploring playful learning. I am a gamer. I like to game, so you will often find a lot of gamified elements within what I'm doing, but very specifically looking at the intrinsic motivation around playful learning. So that's just a little bit about me. And I can't wait to get to know each of you. Steph, you can move on to the next. So our Making CS Inclusive cohort, as Stephanie had already mentioned, we will have monthly sessions that will go from January through about the end of June to August. It depends also on your school schedules and what that looks like as we get towards the end of the year. These sessions will be virtual, and I will work with the entire cohort to find times that work for everyone's schedule. From August through December, these will be optional, and depending on our cohort and what opportunities and areas we have of expertise, because I am a believer that in a professional learning community, everyone brings something to the table. There may be very specialized topics that come up that we may want to explore. I have a large network of educators personally through all of my previous experiences, as well as the Digital Promise network of educators. And sometimes I'm able to bring speakers into a session. So if we are very interested in generative AI or whatever topic may be at the front of your mind in your makerspaces or your classrooms, working towards these goals, that's what we will organize our sessions around. You will also have the option of monthly one-on-one individual sessions with me through a booking calendar. I mentioned already the collaborative design. So this is very important part for me. I have participated in a lot of professional development over my years, and I am not a fan of the sort of sage on the stage and sit and get style. Most of my sessions are very interactive. I like to understand where you are, what you're interested in, what your goals are. And again, you bring a lot of talents and a lot of expertise and experiences and stories to the table that help in a cohort setting to enrich every other teacher that is in their experience. It is personalized, so we do begin with goal setting within your individual context. I do try to bring a playful learning approach to everything that I do. And this question that I just want to leave you with, as it's what kind of guides how I design the learning experiences, are what do you bring to the community and what do you want to learn from the community? And that pretty much covers anything that I could kind of give you a preview for the Making CS Inclusive cohort. For the questions that we have, so John's question was, do funds need to be exhausted within a particular period of time? He's thinking that grant funds might support student work over a longer period of time.
That is a really good question. So I'll clarify that these are one-year grants. And so just in terms of timing, the likelihood is that the grants for the winners will be, so the sort of the checks will be what we're the timeline we're working off of is that, we'll announce the winners in December. There'll need to be a little bit of time between when we share the grant agreements with winners and then they sign them, we sign them, and then actually send checks out to those winning organizations and institutions. So it's likely that winners will receive their funding in February and that the grant will start in like the January, February timeframe, probably that February timeframe. So you can sort of think of like February 2024 to February 2025. I will flag that, this isn't what we what we like to see, but like there have been situations where will extend a grant agreement if necessary. We certainly did that, for example, for winners during the years that the pandemic were at their peak, because there were quite a few winners who had a lot of their proposed projects were like bent on in-person interactions. They couldn't do them, so we do grant extensions when needed under certain circumstances. But I would recommend that as you're thinking about your application, that you kind of base the scope off of a 1-year grant, and then but know that as an educator, we understand that things can change, and if there is that opportunity to extend a grant, like a no cost extension if needed. Hopefully that's helpful.
And then the last question we have right now says, can you talk a little more about the additional nomination cohort process? Are these individuals part of the award scope, or are there other individuals within the org that will be a part of the learning process workshop offered by the Infy Makers Awards contest?
Sure. So I would say that and Kelly, maybe you can also maybe shed some light on this too, because you spent time with the winners and their colleagues and can kind of like speak to some of the sort of dynamics and how they're working together.
Yeah.
I would say that the sort of the additional up to so you can the winners, each of the winners winning, you can say each of the winning organizations or institutions can have up to 3 individuals that participate in the cohort. That would include like the sort of 1 winning educator that's recognized, and then 2 colleagues. Those colleagues, I would say too, like I understand that like different organizations and institutions have different titles. So for example, they don't have to be necessarily a teacher by title or an educator by title, right, Kelly? So like you could think of like a K-12 school, if they were applying, maybe the educator that's applying is actually a classroom teacher, but maybe that person would like to have the school librarian participate, and the physical education teacher, because like there are maybe like connections to, maybe the project is having to do with like health and science and making. I'm sort of making this up, but those are all colleagues that could conceivably participate. Or if you had you were an educator at a nonprofit organization, and you're the director of your team might want to participate in the cohort. They might not necessarily directly interact with students, but like if you found that beneficial and they were interested in participating, they could certainly participate. But Kelly, yeah, I'd love your thoughts there too.
Yeah, no, everything you said I think was spot on. I think some teachers are in a fortunate school culture where they support co-teaching. And so you may have a co-teacher, you may have like projects that you're able to work on with additional teachers. I would also say if you have instructional technology staff, whether it is at the district level or whether it's in your school. So these are the folks who often help you get connected to the internet. And so when you buy if you decide on a 3D printer and it's network connected, they would need to be involved to help you with that. They may be more heavily involved as well in terms of district PD and those sorts of initiatives. But if you are in the habit of working collaboratively with your co-educators, and I hope you all are, then really any of them could be a part of the process where you maybe decide on a project that you want to actually do together and scope it out and decide that budget, and then they could be included on that. Additionally, if you are, like as Steph was saying, thinking of pairing up unique teachers, an art teacher and a technology teacher, what can be done there. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities. The librarian is another great possibility. If there is a club or like an after school, out of school time sort of program, and you have often there's multiple teachers involved in that. I know I saw someone mention in the chat the FIRST Robotics, coaching for FIRST Robotics. I know I used to do FIRST Lego League and I did judging and coaching and all of the volunteering. And there were a lot of teachers involved in that. It was never just one. So that is another potential avenue as well.
Thanks,
I hope that
Kelly.
answers your question.
Yeah, hopefully that gives you lots of different ideas in terms of the ways that your colleagues could be involved. Were there any other questions or thoughts that folks wanted to share? I don't know if Clint, do you still have, I see your hand is still raised. I'll
I
just give you.
think you have to, somebody has to
I'm
clear it.
sorry.
I don't know.
Good. Thank
Oh
you
no,
so
that's
much.
There you
okay.
go.
There you go. I like unmuted you just in case. Did you have another question or anything? Oh, Clint, or he probably unmuted.
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I just on behalf of Infosys Foundation USA, thank you so much for your interest in the Infy Makers Awards. We hope to receive your application soon. And if you do, oh, actually, one other thing that I'll do is I will go ahead and send a copy of this recording afterwards via email to each of you, as well as the link to the Pathfinders Online Institute. I know that was something that a number of folks might be interested in. We also have an opportunity we're doing another info session on October 9th. If you have colleagues that want to join live and ask any questions live, but didn't get a chance to do that, I'll include information about that session as well. But since for those of you who attended today, you don't have to attend that session. It's the same information. Otherwise, thank you so much for participating, and best of luck on the application, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.